Hello, I'm Professor Reboot. In this video, I'm going to show you how to construct a proper MLA 9th in-text citation. Now, an in-text citation is when you tell your reader where in the body of your paper you got material, whether it is paraphrased, summarized, or quoted, from research. And that in-text citation is designed to line up with your bibliographical citation, which appears at the end of your paper on its own page, and in MLA format is called Works Cited. So whatever I put for the first part of a bibliographic citation will match the in-text citation, because the purpose is to guide the reader from the place in my paper where I referenced whoever it is I'm referencing to the full bibliographical citation, so that the reader can then conduct the same research I'm conducting. Because academic writing is all about the science of building on the research that came before. Now, before you try to conduct your own in-text citations or bibliographical citations, which will be another video, it is extremely important that you understand the difference between different sources you might be citing, because every source is cited a little bit differently. So let's begin. You are looking at a MLA constructed first page. We already have the hallmarks of an MLA paper, so your reader knows that this is MLA style. And we already have the first paragraph, including the thesis and thesis map. All of those videos are available on my YouTube channel if you need some guidance on how to conduct that aspect of your writing. But let's jump into the actual introduction of our research. So the first thing that you would do is always write a transition sentence from your last paragraph into your current paragraph, which will be a separate video. So we'll just say transition from previous paragraph. And then you introduce research that supports your thesis statement. So for the first bit of research, I'm going to show you a pretty basic citation. We're going to cite a book that has a page number, and it's by one author. Now, whether you are citing by paraphrase, summary, or quotation, three different types of things you might cite, you always have to cite any claim that you get from another resource, even if you put it into your own words. That's called paraphrasing. And I'm going to pull a quote from this book, Design for How People Learn by Julie Dirksen, which is in my video on how to identify different types of sources. The first thing I do is provide what's called a signal phrase to signal to the reader that I'm about to give you some research from another source. And now I'm quoting. Notice how I fold the quote into my paper. So that ends the quotation, and it actually ends in the middle of the sentence on the page that I'm citing from the book. But that's okay, because a citation does not require you to use the entire sentence. Here I've put this quote in from Julie Dirksen, and notice how I did not put the period inside the quotation marks. That is very, very strict for just about any citation style, because the citation goes with the sentence, which means any punctuation that might be required goes after the citation. Put the author's last name and then just the page number for the citation. And I put the period after if that ends the sentence. Now later, when I get to Works Cited, I will start my citation with the author's last name, comma, full first name. And this will be alphabetically arranged. We will cover that in another video. But it is important for you to know that this should always directly lead at least the first part of the entry for your Works Cited citation. This is not the only way that you can cite a book like this. Let's say I actually name Julie Dirksen in my paper. I might say, Dirksen goes on to explain that some knowledge or skills can be acquired quickly, but others are slow and take a long time to develop. Now, in this case, I'm going to paraphrase. When you paraphrase something, you are taking content that is written by someone else and putting it into your own words. However, you have to do so significantly enough that you prove to your reader it is better that you paraphrased it than just quoted it. So it would not do for me to just say certain information can be gained fast because she says some knowledge or skills can be acquired quickly. That's way too close to the original. I might as well just quote it. So instead, I'm going to paraphrase this. I'm going to synthesize what she's saying here into my own words. And as you can see, that is pretty different than what the quote I am pulling from would have said. Now notice how I put a space in. I have mentioned the author's name in text. What that means is now at the end of the citation, I only need to put the page number that I got it from. And this is true too, whether it's a quotation or a summary as well. So if I had quoted her, I might say, same principle. If I name the author in my writing, because I'm the writer of this paper, and I put the author's name of the research I'm conducting in my paper, then I only need to put the page number at the end. However, if I don't do that, like I did up here, according to a leading expert in instructional design, I do need to put the author's last name in my in-text citation. Let's look at something a little more complicated. This is a online OER or open educational resource textbook that I use in my ethics classes. It is an intro to ethics, an open source reader, and it looks like the author is right here, Lee Archie and John Archie, but in fact, they're not authors, they are editors. So it is critical that I pay attention to what page I am citing from, because if I'm citing from their introduction, so the preface, why open source, a note about selections, then I am in fact quoting Archie and Archie. However, if I jump into even the first chapter, that is a different author. It is Hubbard Winslow. Or the second chapter is Alexander Bain. Third chapter, Foote. Fourth chapter, Elwood. And so on and so forth. So I want to get to, we'll do John Stuart Mill, 83. So let's get to that page. A little too far. Now, what I am seeing here is an anthology where John Archie and Lee Archie, the editors, pulled together content from multiple authors. So I might cite this book a dozen times, but because I'm citing different chapters, each time I cite the book, I would be referencing a different author, because the author is always the most important part of your citation, or I should say the content creator. So when we get to Works Cited and we look at this particular source, you will see that if I cite John Stuart Mill, Alexander Bain, and Hubbard Winslow all from the same book, I'm going to have 3 separate bibliographic references to the same book because all of them will start with a different writer. So here I am going to go ahead and quote this right here. So now I am writing about a famous philosopher, and I'm writing about it from a paginated resource. Remember, this is a PDF. It has page numbers, even though it's a website. And I am referring to an author that appears in a book by someone else. I am not going to use Archie and Archie. I'm going to use the author of this quotation. So that means I would say a famous philosopher. And just a quick note, I'm throwing together citations for you. If this were a real paper, I would actually have to connect everything in this paragraph so that it makes sense. Right now I'm demonstrating citations. This is not a paper. This is citation demonstration. A paper would link why Julie Dirksen and John Stuart Mill belong together in the same sentence. But according to a famous philosopher, end quote, and then I put the author in and the page number, which if you recall was 83. Now, I'm going to continue this sentence rather than put a period there. And Because remember, a quotation is about weaving it into your own sentence and signaling. So a famous philosopher, that's not quite a sentence yet, stated that. So as you can see, the in-text citation goes right next to whatever it is I cited, even if it's in the middle of a sentence. So just for the sake of reminding you, Mill reference should go to the Works Cited page, which remember is its own page. So I'm inserting a page break. And John Stuart Mill alphabetically comes after Dirksen. So I'm going to go ahead and put his name here. And that is really just to remind me that when I get to the end of my paper, I need to do a bibliographical citation for both of these because I listed them in my in-text. For every in-text citation, you must have at least one matching bibliographic citation and vice versa. If you do not, you have wandered into the territory of potential academic integrity violation, otherwise known as plagiarism. So it is imperative that you cite things correctly. So just as before, if I also decide to list Mill's name in the body of my paper, I also would construct it differently. So here I've used the author's name again in text, created a paraphrase of the author's work, put the page number right next to where it belongs, and finished the sentence. Whenever you use an in-text citation, remember your job is to explain how and why it relates back to your thesis. So you always want to be explaining the use of your sources in text. Now, occasionally you will have to cite sources that do not have an identifiable author. Often those will have instead what is called an institutional or a corporate author. For example, we are looking at the MLA Style Center page for MLA citation style, and nowhere on this particular page will you find an identifiable singular author. Let's say I want to talk about the handbook itself. So I've grabbed the section that I want to quote, and now with an institutional author, I would in-text cite them as though that institution is the author. Occasionally that can happen different ways. In this case, I do know that this is the MLA Style Center, and so that would be the institutional author. However, if I didn't necessarily know that they were the ones that constructed the content, I might instead refer to the title of the article or the page I am referencing, which in this case would be this right here. But because I know that this is the institutional author, I will set that up this way. And then I'm going to put the name of the institution here. There's no page number because it's an HTML source, and I'm just going to finish that sentence. So here you have an example of an institutional author, and I just want to throw that in. We're lucky everything that I've been putting in has been alphabetically organized anyway, but that's about to change. So this is just to remind me that when I get to my Works Cited, I need to include this citation in my bibliography. Now let's look at how you would cite two sources of information by the same author, because they're going to have the same last name. I'm going to cite Sylvia Plath's book, The Bell Jar, as it appears unpaginated on a website called Project Gutenberg. And I'm also going to cite a poem by Sylvia Plath called Lady Lazarus. Now, a poem and a book are fundamentally cited differently, but regardless, when you have either two sources with the same last name, let's say Smith, and you've got John Smith and Richard Smith, you would actually put the first initial of their name. So just for the sake of argument, let's say, now in this case, we were imagining that I have two sources by people with the last name Smith, and their HTML sources, because note there's no page number. This is MLA, so we don't even put a paragraph number in there. And now I've got two Smiths, so I need to put them here in the Works Cited. Now in text, I put just their first initial, and I do that because it's just to distinguish in text which Smith is which. But in my Works Cited, I need to put them alphabetically and use their full first name. So here we'll say Smith John, because J comes before R, and Smith Richard. And that's to remind me that I need to put both of those sources into the body of my Works Cited when I get there. Now let's move on to Sylvia Plath. So I've set up an introduction, a transition to this book that I'm about to reference, Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, as it appears on Project Gutenberg. And notice Gutenberg does give me the information about the edition they referenced, but I have no page numbers here. It is just one long scroll of information. So here I've got When I'm Sad I'm Going to Die, or So Nervous I Can't Sleep, or In Love with Somebody I Won't Be Seeing for a Week. I slump down just so far, and then I say, I'll go take a hot bath. Now this is an interesting one because it has a quote within a quote. So here I am going to make that quote now. Remember, I need a signal, so I'm going to say, in the book, the narrator, because a book is a work of fiction, so the narrator, not the author. So because there is a quote within a quote, I'll go take a bath. This use of singular quotation is exactly how I would do that. I'm going to go ahead and put the end quote there, but first I have to take that period out because remember, the sentence needs to include the citation. So here I'm going to put Plath and leave it at that. So in this case, it would be Plath and then the name of the book. If I am concerned that my reader might not be able to tell the difference. So we'll just go ahead and do that. And now I'm going to compare that to a poem by her. And the poem has a speaker, not the author. Just because it says I, it does not mean that it is the author speaking. It is the person who is embodying this poem that we're about to reference. And here I am going to reference Lady Lazarus, which is about a woman who apparently comes back from the dead. And I'm going to reference these 3 lines here. Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well because it relates back to what I just wrote about the bell jar. And notice how it breaks up the lines. I cannot do that. I actually have to show where the line breaks are. So the lines breaks after dying, else, and then well. So here I'm going to put / and then delete. And then I'm going to get rid of the period, / and delete. And then I'm going to get rid of that last period and put the end quotation there. So that is how you show a line break in poetry. And when you are citing poetry, remember I have 2 things by the same author. So I have to put the name of the piece that I'm referencing. So in this case, I have put the author, the book in my previous reference to Plath, but because I'm reciting Plath again, I'm putting the title of the poem. But with poetry, you add something else. You need to cite the line numbers. So I start at the top of the poem and I assign a number to each line. 1, 2, 3, 43, 44, 45. And so I will put in my in-text citation 43 through 45. And that signifies to the reader that I am citing line numbers 43 through 45. Now I want to draw your attention to a mistake that I have just caught in my citation structure. Previously, I have been working with double spacing, but somehow when I started writing about Sylvia Plath, the spacing changed. Well, it is my responsibility as a writer of this work to make sure that the entire paper is double spaced. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that right here. And make sure line spacing is always double. And that I indent each new paragraph. So now that is correctly structured in MLA formatting. Now, of course, because I have now cited Plath, I need to insert Plath where she belongs alphabetically. So Plath, Sylvia. And because I have 2 sources by her, I actually need to remember which is which. So Lady Lazarus is a poem, gets put in quotations. We will cover this in the section on how to do a bibliographic citation, and a book gets italicized. So again, we're making sure everything here in Works Cited is alphabetically arranged. We will discuss how to develop your Works Cited page at a later time. For now, the last thing I want to show you how to in-text cite is when you have a source that does not have a necessarily obvious corporate or institutional author, but instead has at least a title for you to go from. So we're going to pretend here that this source doesn't identify that it's from Yale University or even the Purview Center for Teaching and Learning, that all we have is this title. It's a blog post that you stumbled upon and you see only this title, Understanding and Avoiding Plagiarism When You Cite. And I decide that I want to paraphrase this. I am going to grab the title so that I remember it. And in MLA, because this is HTML, I don't need to put a page number because there isn't one to include. Instead, I'm going to say, okay, so I have now paraphrased content from that page, and I'm going to put quotations around it because in MLA formatting, we put quotations around our citation. And this, of course, again, is a new paragraph, and for some reason, it kicked out the formatting again. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix the formatting. Select all, do it for everything all at once, and make sure that that line spacing is set to double. Et voila. I have now shown you some of the most basic in-text citations for MLA 9th. And before I forget, let me go ahead and throw this article in to my Works Cited page so that I remember to include it. Quotations and all, because quotations signify that it is an article title. And U comes after S, so now that is alphabetically in my Works Cited, and now I have all of the reminders that I need to go back and finish the bibliographical citations when I do my Works Cited page. But for now, you now see how to structure in-text citations throughout your paper using either the author's name, the page number, just the page number if you refer to the author, and different ways of referencing in-text sources.